On Halloween night in 2002, four girls were walking along a deserted street past an old church. A man dressed in a clown costume was standing next to the church. He asked the girls if they had seen his puppy. When they replied that they had not seen, the clown asked them to help him look for the missing puppy. The girls agreed, and a man in a clown costume led them to the old church. As soon as they entered, the man slammed the door, locking them in the old building. The girls realized that they had been deceived, but it was too late. They tried to escape, but the man was very fast and agile. The man tied up the girls and kept them in the church for several hours. He was doing his dirty deeds, and the screams of the girls echoed off the marble walls, wooden rafters, and painted ceiling. The girls thought he would let them go after all that had happened. But they were wrong. He killed them one by one and fled. People who saw the clown walking the streets didn't suspect anything because it was Halloween night and many were dressed in different costumes. If only they could imagine that his suit was red with blood. The next morning, the local priest was surprised to find that the church door was not locked. He went inside and heard a mysterious dripping sound in the dark. When he walked to the altar, he saw a pool of blood on the floor. He quickly turned on all the lights in the church and looked at the terrible picture with horror. The dripping sound came from the headless bodies of the girls who were suspended from the wooden rafters. Their blood dripped from their necks and flowed onto the altar. But the worst was yet to come. The bodies of the girls were buried in a small cemetery behind the church. Just a few weeks later, their parents received 4 sealed packages in the mail. When they unwrapped the packages, they recoiled in horror. There were the severed heads of their daughters. Some people say that if you visit that old church on Halloween night, you will see the ghosts of 4 murdered girls near the altar. According to legend, you can hear their screams in the dark. The person who committed this terrible crime has never been found. So if someone comes up to you and asks you to help him find a puppy, remember this story. The second story. One evening before dinner, my friend Isabella called me. She cried when she told me that she and her husband Enrique were getting divorced. Earlier that day, he had left the house, and Isabella was distraught. I called my husband, who was on a business trip to Chicago, and he agreed that I should stay with Isabella for a few days to help her during this difficult time. I packed a small suitcase and got into the car. It was getting late, and it would take me at least 4 hours to get from home to Santa Fe. Isabella expected me to arrive around midnight. As I drove along the dark, wet highway, I kept getting chills, as if someone or something was watching me. I kept looking in the rearview mirror and looking at the back seat. There was no one there. Don't be ridiculous, I said to myself, longing to be at home, in my bed, and not driving on a dark, rainy highway. There were almost no traffic jams, and I sincerely wanted to get to Santa Fe as soon as possible. I turned off the highway just before I got to town and took the side road leading to Isabella's house. When I came to a small intersection, I saw a woman walking out into the street right in front of my car. I screamed in fright and slammed on the brakes, praying to let her through. The car shuddered and stopped, and I frantically looked around for a woman. Then I saw her right next to my window, looking at me. She had the distorted face of a demon, glowing red eyes and short, sharp teeth. I screamed as she jumped to my window, her clawed hands hitting the glass. I hit the gas pedal and the car shot forward. For a few terrifying moments, she ran along the car, easily keeping up and hitting me again and again. Then she fell behind, and in the rearview mirror I saw her getting taller and taller until she was as big as a tree. The red light swirled around her like a mist, and she pointed after me, her mouth moving, although I couldn't make out the words. I turned my attention back to the road, fearing what might happen to me if my car left the street. I got to Isabella's house in record time and jumped out of the car, frantically knocking on her door and looking back to see if the demon-faced woman had followed me. Isabella ran to the door and let me in. "Close the door! Close it!" I screamed frantically, rushing past her to the safe house. "Jane, what's wrong?" "What is it?" she asked, slamming the door. She grabbed my hand and led me into the living room. I sat down on the sofa and began to sob from fear and reaction. After a few minutes, I managed to tell my story. Isabella gasped and asked, "Are you sure you were at a crossroads when you saw her?" I nodded, puzzled by her question. "It must have been La Malhora," Isabella said, wringing her hands. "Bad hour?" I asked. "This is bad, Jane." "Very bad," Isabella exclaimed. La Malhora appears at the crossroads only when someone dies. Normally I would have laughed at such a superstition, but the appearance of a female demon shocked me. Isabella brought me a cup of hot cocoa, brought my luggage from the car, and sent me to bed. She was so worried about me that she never mentioned the divorce or Enrique. The next morning I felt much better, but I could not get rid of the feeling of fear that had been growing in me all day. Neither of us mentioned La Malhora, but we were both thinking about her when I told Isabella I wanted to go home. Isabella insisted on accompanying me. I flatly refused to go after dark. I was afraid that I would see the demon woman again when I passed the intersection. We left the next morning and hadn't been home for 20 minutes when a police car pulled up to my house. I knew immediately what it meant, and so did Isabella. The officers spoke to me very gently, but nothing could soften this news. My husband was robbed last night when he was returning to the hotel after dinner. His body was not found until this morning. He was shot in the head and killed instantly.